Good evening, everyone. I'm Faysal, and Garine was one of my best friends. I want to thank her family for giving me the opportunity to say a few words about her. First, I want to offer my condolences to everyone here, and especially her family, who I've come to know and love over the years, and even more so over the past couple of weeks. Lalig and Van, who supported her all of these years, brother Aram, aunts, uncles, and cousins, many of whom came from Lebanon to be here today, and to John, who many people would say was more of a family member than anyone as he became closest to Garine. In the spirit of Garine's wishes of not wanting to have many tears, I thought I'd come up here and share some stories about her. I've known her since 2006. I was in my fourth year at UCLA when she began her first year, and she quickly became like a younger sister to me. For her to be gone right now just doesn't feel real to me. I've been trying to figure out why it feels that way. I think it's because for me, and I'm sure for many of us here, Garine took up much more space in our minds than she did in person. Her spiritual presence was much larger than her physical presence. She's one of those people you don't need to have around to feel her effect. She's someone you think of and grow stronger from immediately. Some people you derive pleasure from only by being around them. But she was the type of person you needed to meet only once, hear her story, and forever be impacted by her personality. She's someone who becomes part of your state of mind. And that hasn't changed since she physically left us, and maybe that's why it hasn't settled in. As a tribute to her, I thought I would share with you the 10 things she's taught me over the years, and actually things that I'm sure she's taught many of us here. Number 1, she taught us to dance even when we're hurting. I first met her during a Lebanese culture show practice session at UCLA, and it was there that I caught a first glimpse of the scar on her lower back. It intrigued me. I later asked her about it, and that's how our friendship began. But she danced like she never had surgery, let alone over a year of chemo at that time. So we should all dance to push through the hurt. That's what she would have done. Number 2, she taught us how to be fearless. I remember having dinner with her once, and she was driving me back to my apartment. She had just gotten her brand new BMW and was thrilled at what it could do. She pulled into the driveway, which was probably only 70 feet long. She said, "Feis, check this out." She stepped on the gas pedal all the way down. The car went flying, straight ahead towards my apartment building with an acceleration I had never experienced before in a car. We were basically about to go off the cliff when she slammed on the brakes just inches before the end. She started laughing hysterically, and I was in shock. But a few seconds later, I started laughing hysterically with her. I can't say that because of that I'm fearless, but it's a philosophy I try to adopt, and I'd encourage all of us to be that way. Number 3, she taught us how to think of others, even when we're going through the worst of times. This is something that always amazed me about her. She would be on chemo, and I would be calling just to see how she's doing, and she would ask me how I was. I still remember her voice. "So, tell me about you. How was your day? What's new?" Anything I could tell her about my day would pale in significance to hers, but she was selfless enough to ask. She would want to hear about my trivial problems and have those trivial conversations. Maybe they were distractions for her. Maybe she'd learned to live vicariously through her friends. But at the time of her worst pain, her mind did not leave those she loved. Let's try and be as selfless as she was. Number 4, she taught us that life goes on no matter what. And if it wasn't going to wait for us, we shouldn't wait for it. Garine was first diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma in high school. She had to be admitted to the hospital to receive her first chemotherapy. She worked on her college applications in the hospital. She wasn't going to wait for life. She just kept on going. And later on during college, she would be enrolled in classes at UCLA and still go to her chemo a few times a week. She would study for her midterms despite her symptoms. She transferred to USC to pursue her degree in real estate. She started the Ewing Sarcoma Research Foundation in between relapses. She took control and assembled a committee, registered the organization, interviewed directors of Ewing Sarcoma research labs across the country to see who it would be best to donate to. She organized a very successful fundraiser for the organization from her hospital bed this past May. I would go visit her during her 2-week stay there and find her on the phone with Party Plus figuring out what the best decorations would be. She would hand out flyers to her nurses and send emails encouraging people to come. So we should all not wait for life, but keep going, and to live on in the rockiest of times, because as she taught us, it can always get rockier. Number 5, she taught us how to fight and how to have a strong will. Several years ago, she described to me an experience of hers being in the hospital intensive care unit. She was curious about the monitor she was attached to, and her doctor explained to her that it was tracking things like her blood pressure and her heart rate. She asked him what the numbers should be. She was very sick, and at that time she was actually she was close to not making it during the night. So her doctor told her that overnight will be a very critical time for her, and if her heart rate drops below 40, it could be the end. I remember her describing to me later on what happened at 2 a.m. that night. It was dark, and she was alone, and her heart rate was in the 60s and slowly began to come down. 50s, then 49, 48, 47. She told me she never got scared. She told me she prayed the hardest she's ever prayed that night. Her heart rate kept dropping, 45, 44, 43, 42, 41. She closed her eyes tight and kept thinking positively and about exciting things to get her heart rate back up. And then 41, 42, 43, 44. Back up to the 50s and back up to the 60s. She made it through that night and many years after that. She was not broken by things going against her. Her will stayed strong and things soon reversed. She taught us all how to live this way. Number 6, she taught us about loyalty. Her faith in God drove her during her weakest moments. Even when she had doubts because of her condition, she believed in something and stuck with it at all times. When it was the most difficult to believe that a universal force was looking out for her, she remained loyal to her faith. She also remained loyal to the Armenian and Lebanese communities as well. She was the president of the Lebanese Social Club at UCLA and also campaigned for increased awareness about the Armenian genocide. She taught us to educate those around us about not only what we stand for, but why we stand for it, and most importantly, how to always do so respectfully. Number 7, she taught me how to be a better doctor. She told me what she liked or didn't like about her doctors. She told me what a good approach is and what a bad approach is. She taught me to stand in the shoes of my patients at all times. And once she said something to me that absolutely shook me. She said, "Fais, sometimes, no matter how nice you are to your patients, they will still hate the sight of your face." I understood from her that everything is about context, and that patients will very often associate my face with being sick, and they will hate me. Because of that, I no longer have expectations of how my patients view me. I know how much they're suffering because I know how much she suffered. Her perspective was one that I had never heard before. Her statement was better than an entire medical textbook on doctor-patient relationships. The things that would come out of her mouth would leave me in awe, and she convinced us all that her brain was 50 years older than her body. Her wisdom inspired us all. Number 8, she taught us what it meant to be reasonable and logical at all times. When she was running out of chemotherapy options, she began looking online for some alternative treatments. She wanted desperately to find a miracle solution, a backup if the chemo wasn't going to work. And she was very excited about something called the Gerson diet, which claimed on the website to cure many cancers with a mix of fruit and vegetable juices and dietary modifications. She asked me what I thought, and after some research it appeared to me to be a scam, with no evidence to back up the claims and with stories of people actually being harmed by it. She was definitely saddened when I told her this, but she remained reasonable. She understood the risks and benefits of it. She digested that information. She was not irrational. We can all learn from her that no matter how emotional we are, we can still be rational and think logically. If she did it when it was a matter of life and death, we can do it daily. Number 9, she taught us to not be limited by odds, but to challenge the odds. That numbers aren't everything, and when the odds were against her, she surpassed them. When the 5-year survival of adolescents with Ewing's sarcoma was quite low, and even lower for the location of her disease, she lived for 3 more years. She battled the disease 5 times. When a very small number of patients responded to the experimental treatments she received later on, she responded. And when everyone thought that she had just 1 more night in her last week, she kept going for a couple more. So let us remember her when we're given any odds, and in her honor, let's challenge them. Number 10, She taught us how to live out the phrase, treasure each day like it's your last. She told me in May that she always found it strange how people hated their birthdays. She didn't understand it. She said to me, they should be happy that they made it another year. For me, every single day is a victory. And I'm sure all of us here know that she actually lived that way. She didn't just say it. She would still wear heels when her back hurt. She refused to ever be in a wheelchair. She would have pain in her hip joint, but still come out to nightclubs with her friends and party on the dance floor like nothing had ever happened to her. We would ask her if she wanted to go home, and she would say no. She would stay up till 4 a.m. eating questionable food at Denny's. If that was her last day, I think she would have been happy with it. And so for her, we should make each of our days count as well. Garino, you will remain my moral compass throughout life. I think of you every single time I'm going through a difficult period, and what I'm going through is never as bad as what you went through. You give me strength, you give me perspective. You have been a gift to us all. You left an incredible legacy. I guess that was your purpose in this world, and you served it better in 24 years than most people could do in 100. We will miss you always, Garino. Thank you for being a part of our lives. We owe you so much. We will never forget you. May you rest in peace, our angel.